Kiss, the book you're all here for tonight. We are talking about the special 10-year anniversary collector's edition of this book. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. It's so amazing. And just real quickly, I have to talk a little bit about my own history with this book. I met my first published author in the form of Miss Stephanie Perkins. She was the first published author I ever met in my life. And I was a bookish kid. And as bookish kids tend to be, I put books on a pedestal, and I put the people who wrote books on a pedestal. And I imagined them as people who lived in these ivory towers, separate and apart from everybody else. And they were these unknowable people, kind of untouchable. So the first published author I ever met was Stephanie. And that was the first time I realized, wait a minute, creators walk among us. Brilliant people walk among us. The people who create the books we read are the people who are working the circulation desk at a small library in Weaverville, North Carolina, which was what Stephanie was doing when I met her. And that was such a profound sea change in my thinking. I began to think of stories and the people who create stories in an entirely different way. And I didn't lose any of the magic. I didn't see them as any less brilliant or amazing. It just made it all seem like something that was more attainable through hard work and through love of the craft. And so I watched Stephanie every step of the way as she went to publish this book, as she got an agent, as she mulled titles for Anna and the French Kiss, as she did all of that. She put my name in the acknowledgments. That was the first time I had ever been able to go to a bookshelf and pull a book off the shelf and see my name in it. And every bookstore I went in, I would go find a copy of Anna and the French Kiss, which they always had a bunch of copies of. I would go pull it off the shelf and I would look at my name in that book and I would just feel warm all over. And I would think, that is what I want to do. I want to create stories like that. And she would tell me about the stories she would create and the readers she would encounter. And I said, that is what I want to do. I need to do that. So what I'm saying is that without Anna and the French Kiss, that book that you all love so much, there would be none of my books. All of my books owe their existence to Anna and the French Kiss. And I know this book has touched so many of your lives as well in different ways. So we're going to take a deep dive tonight, and we are going to talk about how this book came into being. I'm going to try to see your face here, Stephanie. For some reason, I can't see you on video, and I want to be able to see your smiling face. Well,
how do
anyway,
we get me there?
There you are.
Am I there?
You're there.
Okay.
Now I can
okay,
see
good.
you. So
okay, good.
Stephanie, let's just start from the beginning. How on earth did you become a writer? How did this seem like something you could and wanted to do?
I just spaced out during your questions because I'm just I guess I'm just so happy to be here with you. And that was such a lovely introduction. And you were the only author who I could invite here to this event with me tonight. It just felt right. You are a part of my origin story and this book's origin story. And I'm so grateful that you're here to share that with me. And just another really quick thank you to Malaprops for hosting us tonight. And Katie for the introduction, Stephanie for hooking all of this up. But especially to all of my readers who purchased, I've got a copy, who purchased this and supported my hometown bookstore, my booksellers. It means so much to me. This is a really hard year. It's been hard for indies for a while, and then throwing this pandemic on top of it. I'm just so grateful that you really, really, really all came out for them. And I will never, ever forget that. Thank you. So Jeff, what did you just ask me?
Well, okay, I'm going to restate my question, but first I'm going to say one more thing. So I go around and I talk to schools, I talk with classes, and I tell my own story of how I became a writer, and I tell your story as part of that story. And
I didn't
every
know that.
time I do, and the rapturous kind of reception to my telling them that the author of Anna and the French Kiss was part of my own origin story. It's just so incredible. Just the beaming looks on faces, because they'll always interrupt me and they'll ask, who was that author you were talking about? Who's the book? And I'll say Stephanie Perkins, Anna and the French Kiss, and they just light up. It truly is one of the iconic books in the YA canon. It's been so magical to watch your journey, and I want to hear you recount this journey to all these wonderful folks who have tuned in tonight.
Oh gosh. It's weird to be talking about a book that I've been talking about for 10 years now and still not even know what to say. This was it was a small book. I always say, when I sold this book, which would have been 12 years ago, we were in the middle of, the paranormal romance boom, which I myself really enjoyed. I loved Twilight. I was into it. And contemporary, it's never going to go away because there are always going to be readers who want to read about people like them. But it wasn't like this big thing. And of course, right after the paranormal boom, Hunger Games was hot on its heels, dystopian. So there just wasn't a lot of expectations for contemporary books. And that all began to change when John Green's career really exploded, and Gail Forman and If I Stay was happening, and Rainbow Rowell came in, and suddenly there was this larger market for young adult contemporary novels. And I feel like it was right place, right time. I slid in when this market bloomed and suddenly people wanted these books. And I was really fortunate in that in those early days, John Green and we share an editor, and he got a hold of my book before it even came out and really liked it. He read it and liked it, and he talked about it on the Vlogbrothers. And I got a lot of those early readers thanks to John and his community, the Nerdfighter community. And I always joke to my editor, you need to send him a publicity check for all the work he did on my behalf. But it kind of started there, and then it spread through word of mouth, and people were hungry for that type of book. And somehow 10 years later, people are still reading it. And it's a little hard to process to this day. Right place, right time, right book. I don't know.
So let's go back even further, and maybe even before kind of the seeds of the idea of this book took hold. I definitely want you to talk about that, but I would love to know at what point young Stephanie Perkins said, I could become a writer. This is something I can do. This is something I will do. This is something I will work toward. When did that kind of awakening happen?
That's a great question, because there are a few really specific moments that I can point to, where the first one being just where I became aware of the concept of an author. And that would be through the books of the work of Roald Dahl as a child. And that was the first time, his voice is so different from other authors. That was the first time I recognized, oh, there's a very specific person writing those, because they don't sound like the others. And that was exciting to me. And from then on, you were talking about putting authors on a pedestal. It was the same for me. They were these, pinnacle humans. I was lucky to have a few teachers along the way who noticed that I had a very clear interest in reading. And then some noticed oh, she can write too. And it was kind of one of those first things, I was a good student, but I wasn't I didn't excel in anything in particular. And that was the one thing where teachers gently started pointing out oh, you can do this, which was a nice little motivation boost for a shy girl like myself. And then in college, I started as a journalism major because I wanted to write, but I'm oh, I want it to be like a career though, which is hilarious considering what's happened to journalists, which is not hilarious, but like that I thought like, oh, that's how I'm going to make my living in journalism. But I took one journalism class, and the very, very, very first day of class, the teacher talked about, like interviewing other people and asking them questions. And I was like, oh my God, no, like what a nightmare. Oh, right. That's a part of journalism, is having to ask people like really difficult questions. So that was instantly out. And I remember calling my parents terrified and saying like, I want to be a creative writing major. And to my parents, and this credit, they said, yeah, we know. Like, we know that's what you're supposed to be doing. So I was really rare in college, where really all of the other students that I went through the program with, like, did not have that kind of support from their parents, because it is one of those things like, oh, you're going to get a job with that. So I knew it was what I wanted. And I was so fortunate to have that support of my parents and my husband, because I was already married by the time I was in college. But it still was this like fuzzy idea, like, because Jeff, you were a creative writing major in college too, right? Or you studied it? Oh, you studied it?
No, I've never had a creative writing class.
No.
Yeah,
wait,
no, never.
I thought that was part of how we've been friends this long. I really thought like you took some of those classes while you were becoming a lawyer.
No, no.
What? I've been telling people that for years.
No, no, I've never had a creative writing class. I always joke that that generally in a given month I will have taught more creative writing classes than I've ever had.
Oh, that's so funny.
No, just read a bunch of books. I was a communication major.
Yeah, okay. Well, it proves my point anyway, in that I don't think like creative writing classes are like is really what makes a writer anyway. Like the skills that it taught me were how to accept criticism, which is really crucial. And it taught me how to read books like a writer, which is another really crucial skill. But they really discourage anyone who's writing genre, who's writing for younger readers, and all the things I really loved, they discouraged, which so for years, the first few years after college, I had always wanted to write actually for children initially, because like Charlotte's Web to me is like the perfect book. And that's where I envisioned myself as writing for that same audience.
Maybe the best opening line in all literature in Charlotte's Web, by the way.
Absolutely, right?
It's perfect.
I mean, that book holds up. For everyone watching who has not read Charlotte's Web since they were a child, you should. Like, it is a beautiful piece of literature that absolutely holds up as an adult.
Truly.
So I left school thinking, trying to write these very like literary short stories that only other creative writing majors would read in like those literary magazines. And there's no problem with that, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And somehow it was what I was trying to do. And then I tried to like sandwich that into this novel idea I had, and none of it was working. And I was working as a librarian at that time. And it was my second best job in the world. Like I was working for our local public library system. And I was in the position that I would want to have the most. And so like, it was the best job I could possibly have that wasn't being an author. And I was still so unhappy because it wasn't the one I really wanted. And it was in my mid to late 20s that all of a sudden I just had this epiphany, like, oh, the only person who can make this happen is me. And it's not just going to happen. And I've been, like messing around with this other project for 7 years. I had 70 pages to show for it. I'm a slow writer, but that's bad even for me. And so it was really this very firm decision, like I'm going to go for it in a way that is to the equivalent of the hours that I'm putting into my job and my day job as a librarian. I'm going to put those same hours toward becoming a writer. And so I would work my day job, and then I would come home at night and I would go upstairs into my office and I would put in another full shift of work on my book. And in 9 months, I had written a full draft of a book, which oddly enough is the fastest I've ever written a draft. Now I'm like 2 to 3 years I get a draft, but it was it was making a concrete decision of like, oh, I'm the only person standing in my way. Did you have that? So you talked about it a little, Jeff, where you where you saw me, but where like you suddenly became aware that like that's a decision that we make to do this thing, and that it's made by people who are like us, and it's not these people on these pedestals. Was it kind of an overnight thing for you too?
I mean, in a sense, I looked at you and I said, okay, here's what I have in common with Stephanie. Stephanie loves story. She loves stories, and she loves to consume them. So you got to put, material in the pipe to get something out. And I love story too. So I at least have that. We share that. Like, and all kinds of stories. I mean, I remember our little run of time there where we were watching these French horror movies that were like the worst of the worst. Like, I think they weren't rated, but if they were rated, they'd be like NC-17 for depravity. I actually included a tribute to that in my second book, Goodbye Days, where two of the boys watch what they call French torture horror porn movies. But so we would watch those. I always think about that, by the way, when I'm at these school visits and people ask me like, so what is Stephanie Perkins like? Does she just like eat like cucumber sandwiches and like float on clouds? I'm like, oh no, my friend. Oh no. Nobody loves the darkness of the human soul like Stephanie Perkins. So I loved story. I knew you loved story. My big realization was that I started to write at the end of my musical career. And I realized that failure, and I do consider in some ways my musical career to be a success, but in other important ways, I consider it to be a failure. I am not now a professional musician who makes his living solely making music. And that was the goal.
I just
And
want
so
really quickly to tell everybody what a great musician you are. Like, I have seen you play so many times and you're fantastic. And my favorite song was this one.
of
There
course,
was a very direct line.
my kind of darkest and most haunted song. So I was just not afraid to fail anymore, because I had survived the failure of a creative career intact. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to do what Stephanie does. And there's a really, really good chance I'm going to fail. And if that happens, it happens. I've survived the failure of my music career. So it's fine. You can survive failures and pick yourself up and move on. So we've seen now a little bit of the natural history of Stephanie Perkins as a writer. And by the way, I didn't know that stuff. I didn't know that you were like a short story writer, and that I love that. That delights me.
I mean, not really. I never finished one.
Which I think in some ways makes you as true a short story writer as you could possibly be. I think that is the
I shouldn't
hallmark.
admit that. I've edited 2 short story collections.
I was gonna say,
I eventually did finish 2 short stories.
You've edited more short story anthologies than you've completed short stories.
Oh, it's not even, not even close. Yeah.
That's amazing. So let's talk about this book. Let's talk about Anna. Let's talk about the natural history of Anna. When did you know that this was the book you needed to write?
It was less than a week before I started writing it. I had been, the book that I worked on for 7 years was Lola, actually, and it was a very different version of Lola. It was for adults. It started out a little more serious, and I kept adding in rom-com elements because that's what I cared about. And then I kept adding in scenes where she was a teenager because that's what I was drawn to. And it took me a really long time to realize, like, oh, more than half of it is YA. And that's what I was reading in mass quantities. And I had very strong feelings about being a teenager. I remember those years really well. They were hard years. I really, really genuinely love teenagers because I feel sorry for you guys. I remember how difficult it can be. And my heart still, I can go back to that place so quickly. And Jeff, that's something that we've talked about too, something that you have in common as well. And I think a lot of people who write for teenagers have very strong memories of being a teenager and can tap into that pretty quickly. But then on top of that, like, you know, this wonderful thing happened to me when I was a teenager too. And that was that I met my husband and I fell in love and I got married as a teenager. I was 19, which, like, don't do that, you guys. But
if you can marry Jared Perkins, yes, do that. By the
it
way,
worked out for me.
let me just say, I'm not going to ask you to tell the story unless you want to, but I'm just going to say that your story of how you met and fell in love with your husband is the best romantic comedy I've ever heard. It surpasses even your books. It's fantastic. It's a really wonderful story. It's yours to tell if you want, not mine, but I just have to say publicly how much I absolutely love and adore that story. I love you guys.
Thank you. I really love it too. I'm not sure what I've said publicly before and what I haven't, so I think I'll keep it to my chest for the moment. But
Fair enough.
It worked out in the end. And yeah, I fell in love quickly and hard, the way only a teenager can. So what on earth? I'd been working on Lola. It wasn't working out. I got the sense like, oh, this should be a book just for teens. Like, this should be a young adult novel. But I'd already had so many like complicated feelings with that one that I knew I just needed to set it aside. And so the other part of my story that I talk about a lot, but I think it's actually pretty important, is that this decision to really make a go out of it, try something new. It's going to only be young adult, like, just do the best you can and like actually finish a draft. The main thing I wanted more than anything was to finish a draft of something, just finish a book. And NaNoWriMo was coming up, and it had existed for a few years at this point, but I'd never done it before. And up until that point, I'd always like poo-pooed it, like, who can write a book in a year or in a month? Like, totally missing the point of it, that it's not about writing a publishable book in a month, but it's just about writing 50,000 words, which is something that I had not done in 7 years. I had not, you know, I had 70 pages to show. So I'm like, okay, I can give this thing 1 month of my life and we'll see how it goes. And a few days before it started, I had a dream, and it's the one that, like, whenever I'm asked in an interview, where'd your inspiration come from? It's the thing where it's always sounds a little like woo-woo and magical, which I try to usually like push out of my story, but it's the one that I can't escape because it really did happen. And it's the only time it's happened. But I saw this beautiful boy, and he had a French name and an English accent, and I knew we went to an American boarding school together, and I knew that I was really deeply in love with him. And he was sitting on the steps of this beautiful building, clearly somewhere in Europe. And when I woke up, I still felt like very taken by this boy, like, oh. And so I thought, okay, great, like, NaNoWriMo is about to start, we're going to go with this. So what city are we in? And I thought maybe it was Rome, maybe this building was Paris. I wasn't sure. I looked around. It ended up looking like the Pantheon in Paris. So I'm like, okay, this book takes place in Paris. And then there was this immediate like fear because, like my protagonist, I knew very, very little about France. I took Spanish in school. And I felt very intimidated by the French too, because they are typically far more sophisticated than we are. And I hear all of these things about them, you know, like not liking the dumb Americans and the white sneakers. So I had a real fear of French people. And so that was my window into the book. And you know, the couple days before NaNoWriMo started, I did as much research of Paris as I could. I picked the neighborhood where the school would be, the Latin Quarter. And then I just started writing. And it was nothing like the book that exists now. It was about an art heist. I wish I were kidding. It was really bad, but the protagonist was there and I liked her, and the boy was there and I liked him, and their friends were there and I liked them as well, and I liked the setting, and I thought, okay, well, I'll pull out these elements that I like, and now like let's really write a book. But NaNoWriMo was a huge confidence booster for me. I'm not someone that like confidence comes to naturally, but to have that accomplishment of 50,000 words in a month changed everything for me. And I was like, oh, if I can meet that goal, then I can write a rough draft. And 9 months later, I had one. Yeah, I don't.
Wow.
So myself.
So let's talk about the titular Anna. If we were to do a character 23andMe test on Anna, what sort of, this is the first time I've ever asked this question. I'm totally winging this, by the way. What character DNA would we find in Anna?
Oh, Jeff, that's so hard. Oh, what character DNA? Okay. Well, me. It's mainly me, like, right?
So we got 98% Stephanie Perkins.
Yeah, I think but in addition into being in Anna, I meant all of the other characters too. I think early on in our careers, it's really easy to do that as writers. Like those are the first things you can grasp onto, but I still do it. I'm still mainly just writing about myself and working through my own issues. And so at that time, in my mid-20s, I guess I still had some issues related to or just a lot of confidence kind of issues and being comfortable in places. And so it really was this book that as Anna grew more comfortable in her surroundings and more confident as a young adult, I became a lot more confident as a writer. And, you know, and we learned about Paris together and France together. And like she took a French class and I took a French class. And it was this growth, but she is very largely me. There's no getting around that. And she was so me that my editor too was like, I put in all of my baggage. And the first draft, my editor was like, I don't understand why this boy would like this girl. So I had to cut a lot out. And it was the right call. You know, you just put in everything, or I do at least when I write. And then it's like, okay, let's remove these. That's a little much. Do you do the same thing? Do you just, okay. So your first novel is The Servant King. And there's a character named Dill who makes me think quite a bit about Chio. But his situation is not the same as yours at all, family-wise. Not that Anna's family is like mine, because it's not either. But how much of you are you putting into it? Or like it's the language. I mean, it's the Jeff language. Your books are so poetic, and it reminds me of your music. But what's your 23andMe diagnosis?
So yeah, it's similar to you. There's a good hefty dose of me in all of my characters. I wouldn't say maybe to the extent that Anna corresponds to you, but to a pretty healthy extent. I think about it like this. Characters offer me an opportunity to live other lives and to take aspects of my personality and being and sort of plant them in different soil and see how they'll grow. So one of the really magical things about The Serpent King, not so much because there's two teenage boy characters, and it was fun to write them.
If you pause for 1 second, tell people what this is about, because it's so good. And I think that our books actually have a huge crossover. And so for everyone who's here who doesn't know Jeff's books, they're so romantic. They are also contemporary. They're funny. Jeff has such a good sense of humor. Tell them what it's about. Tell them.
So The Serpent King is about 3 misfit teenagers growing up in a small town in rural Tennessee. And it's about them kind of fast approaching this crossroads of the end of their senior year, when they're kind of inevitably going to be pulled in their separate ways. There's the character of Dill, who's the son of a Pentecostal snake handling preacher, which is where the book gets its title. And he's a musician, and he's kind of haunted by the struggles he's had in his life. His best friend is this kind of blue collar fantasy nerd named Travis, who lives in an abusive home and uses fantasy novels as an escape. And then the third member of this trio is, and I realize now that I kind of wrote these to the archetypes of Harry, Ron, and Hermione without even realizing it. But the third member of this trio is a girl named Lydia, who comes from this very upper middle class background. She's a fashion blogger with, tens of thousands of followers online. And it's really just about their struggles and trying to find their way into the light of a better future, I guess. But it was really fun to write Lydia, because to me, it's so fascinating the world teenagers grow up in, where they can command online followings of tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of people, can hear the voice of a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old. That blows my mind, because that is so foreign to my own upbringing. My own growing up, I had more in common with a teenager from the 1930s than a teenager from now. Seriously, like I had my phone, I had a car. That's it. Like no internet. More in common with 1930s than the teenager of 2020. So it was just a lot of fun to write that character of Lydia and to see what parts of my personality, my curiosity, my desire to live and to see things and to make my voice heard, what that would look like in a contemporary teenage girl. So okay.
And you did so well. I love that character. She's very much a Lola for my readers. She's very colorful.
I think that's the best corresponding character in the Stephanie Perkins verse. Okay, so you've got this. And by the way, you didn't just study France, did you? You didn't just study it out of books, did you?
No, but I didn't get to go there. So I was a public librarian. So that's not like a crazy money kind of job. So, but because I was a librarian, I did understand the value of research. And also I had read Diana Gabaldon's Outlander books, and I knew that she had not visited Scotland when she wrote her first book. And yet if you go to Scotland, it's kept in their history sections, which is just amazing to me. And she lives in Arizona, where I grew up, and I felt this kind of kinship there. And well, if she can do it, I can do it. I've got the research skills. So there were a lot of books involved in my research, and it was from every section of the Dewey Decimal System. So, I was reading the travel books. I was reading books written by Americans who had moved or lived in France for a while. I was reading books by native French people. I was reading their cookbooks. I was reading graphic novels, and I was looking at, the images in the background, what things looked like, photography books. I watched every French movie I could get my hands on. In fact, that's probably one of the reasons why we were watching French horror movies. There was probably some link there. I was watching French everything at the time, just so that I could get kind of the mannerisms and, what street lamps look like. Just, I was watching everything but the plot, really, of a lot of those things. I went to community college, and I took a French class because I'm not good at foreign languages, and I'm still not, and I still can't speak French, but it helped. Down the road.
Didn't you live in Paris for a month?
So yes, but that came later. I sold Anna, and I had revised Anna with my editor, and then I knew Lola was mostly done by that point, because it takes so long. Once you sell a book, you kind of have to get in a queue, and it takes a few years to get that going. And so I was kind of in that queue. I wrote Lola, the new version. And then I knew that Isla was next, and Isla also takes place in Paris. And so when I went to Paris for a month, it was for Isla research, actually. But I was really lucky that Anna was in copy edits at the time, so I was able to like check my work. And it was amazing because I got everything except one detail. One detail I got wrong, and that was just the placement of two buildings. And the rest, I mean, like Google Earth is amazing, you guys. Like you can walk down these streets. So yeah, whenever anyone's like, oh, I would love to write a book set somewhere, but I can't afford to visit. And I'm like, you don't have to visit it. Just go to your library. You can do it. You can do anything.
Well, that is really impressive because I felt like I've never been to Paris, but I felt like I was reading a very authentic rendering of Paris. And I thought it was because you had lived there for a month.
No,
No.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, that came
Amazing.
down the road, and I was really lucky to get to do that for Isla. Yeah.
Amazing. So if you will, and I want to take some of y'all's questions because I see those questions piling up there. We got a ton of them. Will you just talk briefly about the process of getting an agent and getting a publisher for Anna?
Yeah, sure. Mine was a little non-traditional. So when aspiring authors ask me, it's always like comes with a big like, ooh. So my agent is Kate Testerman, and she was she was my number one pick from the beginning. She is Maureen Johnson's agent, and they're best friends. And I was a big fan of Maureen's work, and I'd see them talking online a lot. And on Kate's website, she listed the books she loves. They were all books that I loved, and I'm like, oh, I fit right in there. And she was giving this, she was going to be a presenter, a speaker at an SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators conference in Portland. And at that same conference, Laini Taylor was going to be there with her first book, Silk Singer. No, Dream Dark is the first one. Silk Singer's number 2, but she was there with her first book. And I was a huge fan of Laini's. Laini is a really great writing blog. I bet it's still out there. You can find it, called Not for Robots, that helped me a lot when I was revising Anna. And I was such a fan of her. For anyone who doesn't know Laini, she just has this bright pink hair and this colorful house, and she's married to an artist, and like her whole life is just magical. So they were both, Kate and Laini were both going to be at this conference, and I took a gamble and I bought a plane ticket and to meet them both essentially. And Laini and I had talked a little bit like through the comments on her blog. So she knew to expect like the redheaded librarian from North Carolina with blue streaks in her hair. And so we talked a little bit there. And I introduced myself to Kate and told her that I would be submitting something to her in a few months. And she's like, great, just mention in your query that you met me here. And I said, great. So I flew home, a couple more months, got the book ready to send out. And actually, Laini and I had started talking more in that time period. And she's like, send me your book. So I did send it to her. She read a draft of it, gave me some feedback, and then she went on her blog and just raved about it. And my agent read Laini's blog, and she's like, oh, the North Carolina librarian with the blue streaks in her hair. I met her. And so Kate contacted me, and I got to like avoid that whole submitting to agents thing. But it was because I'd made that step. So it was this really lucky kismet of the two of them. And then, of course, it took a while to hear back from her, and I panicked and I sent the book to a couple of other agents, and they all rejected it. So I did get those rejections too, like every author gets. And then Kate came back and was like, I love it. I want to represent it. And then she sent it to a couple editors, including Julie Strauss-Gable, who was my Not Even in My Dreams editor. As I mentioned earlier, she edited John Green's work. He was one of my favorite authors. At that time, it was Paper Towns was his most recent book. So it was pre-Fault in Our Stars, but he had already won, 2 princes. And I loved how romantic his books were, how sincere, and how funny. He's a really, really funny author. Like, it just had everything I loved. And so Julie, because of John and because of Gail Forman, whose book If I Stay had just came out, which I just devoured. because of them. She was my Not Even in My Dreams editor. Kate did not know that. She sent it to her. Julie liked it. So I was just really lucky that I got like my top choice each one. Like it doesn't happen to most people, but also my tastes were really specifically their tastes. So it's not like as outlandish as, you know, it wasn't a huge reach. It felt like it as a new author, but it really wasn't.
Steph, you have lived as good a story as you've ever written. You are quite the protagonist of your own novel. Let's take some questions here. I gotta reach up here. All right. Let's see here. I'm gonna kind of go through here. How has your life changed since Anna was published?
A lot. Like I said earlier, I wasn't expecting people to even really read it. I thought my audience would be very, very, very small, and it just kept growing and kept growing. And because of Anna, which is by far and away my most popular book. Like nothing else even comes close to that. But because of this one book, I've been able to keep publishing, and you know, my editor's still willing to buy things from me, and it allowed me the creative freedom to also and kind of power to also say like, well, now I want to write a horror. And that was really just because that one book had done so unexpectedly well. And so Anna, I'll love her forever, because she gave me an actual career and not just a book, or I guess it was a 2-book deal, so it would have been 2 books and then no more. But the readers were just shocking. Like it's a thing that I still, like, I'm starting to stutter. Like I still have a really hard time processing it and talking about it. That it did connect with a lot of people. And so like I was kind of unexpectedly whisked to some events and some tours, which like hadn't been a part of my game plan at all. And as a very introverted kind of wallflower person, that was really scary. And, you know, I was saying yes to everything for a long time because I was so afraid like, oh, it's going to go away any second now. And so I have to just take advantage of it while it's here. And so like I burned out and crashed really hard a couple years into my career, and like, you know, pushed back Isla a few years, and like it had to be dealt with publicly because it was so obvious that I had crashed and burned. And what happened after that was me just deciding like, oh, I still really, really want this career, but I don't think I can do it in that way. How can I make this still achievable? And that was like scaling back, doing fewer events, putting less online, and just remembering that like, I think it's really, really easy. And I would love your opinion on this, Jeff. If you experience this at all, when you first become an author, all of a sudden, like that is your only identity. And like you become really, really tied up and like in that identity, and maintaining it or growing it or whatever. And I didn't get happy as an author until I thought like, oh, that's just one little part of me. And I have to nurture like my actual life again too. And it's so much healthier. I'm so much happier. Like life is really good now. But how did you manage that when your first book won a major award. You won the Morris Award for a debut young adult author.
Yeah, I mean, I still viewed it and still view it as something that could just end, you know, because of my music career. Again, I go back to that was just a real learning experience, that things don't last forever, and you have a good time with them while you've got them. And if you told me 15 years ago that I would be experiencing kind of the most productive and successful creative output of my life at this point in my life, I would have thought you were crazy. I would have thought no way could that possibly happen. So I think I always looked at it as a bit of a fluke, as something that could kind of end at any time, and I still very much view it that way. So I think for me, I didn't struggle as much with it overtaking my identity, just because I'm like, this is going to end sometime soon. So we've got an amazing question here from the incredible David Levithan that I want to ask because it's so great.
I love you, David.
It's a brilliant question. Of course, it's David. Hi, David Levithan here. Thrilled to celebrate this awesome anniversary. My question is for Stephanie, which character that you've written is most like Jeff? And for Jeff, which character that you've written is most like Stephanie?
Oh, that is so good.
Isn't that a great question?
So good.
It's like this guy should write and edit books or something.
Right. Sure. Can I think that as in terms of your characters, I think I'm most like one of your characters in this book, who is super duper into cheesy horror movies. Like this,
yes.
This is my favorite of Jeff's books. I should hold up your other one too, because I've got them all right here. Goodbye Days. That was Jeff's second book. And then this is the one that when I read it, I was like, oh, there's my friend Jeff. It's like, it's your funniest, weirdest, like it is your sense of humor. I love it. I'm trying to remember Josie
and Delia.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which is which. It's been a few years. I'm so sorry.
So while you're finding that, let me tell you my answer to that, because I agree completely. There's so much Stephanie in that book. But my answer, and I hate to do this, but it is a character from my upcoming book, In the Wild Light. Her name is Delaney Doyle. She's from the mountains of East Tennessee, which is right over the mountains from Steph. She has red hair. And she is a genius. She went into a cave and made a scientific discovery. She discovered a fungus that functions as an incredible antibiotic and kills all antibiotic-resistant bacteria, because I'm terribly afraid of those things. This was a pre-COVID plot line, by the way. So she goes into this cave and makes this incredible discovery. And with her brilliance, she's able to make of this discovery national news. And so she gets a scholarship to this elite private school, and she will not accept that scholarship without bringing her best friend along. And so the story is told from the perspective of this best friend. It's my Good Will Hunting meets Looking for Alaska book. And so
how far are you along? When are you going to send that to me? When can I read it?
It's in second pass pages. I'm going to reveal the cover next month. I'll send it to you as soon as I have a digital arc. I'll have them soon.
It sounds really good. And it's very flattering to be compared to a character who's like so organized and smart and on top of things.
She's incredible. Her name's Delaney Doyle. So that's who you remind me most of my characters.
That's very flattering. Oh, I think, I'm trying to place you into my books, and you feel it's not like you're one character, but like you feel like you have so much in common with the heroes, all of the love interests, and that I always write. I'm not into like alpha heroes, and like that's not a slam against you. That's like I don't want like the beefy like shove them around kind of guy. Like I'm just not into that. Like I'm into guys who are best friends, who are like have these just deep emotional wells in them, and like aren't afraid to go in there and talk about feelings. Like my boys are always very in touch with their feelings. And so it's not so much like I see you as a specific one. I see you as like one of them. Like you are a type that I would absolutely write. And it's why we're friends.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much, because I go around in life identifying people as a Stephanie Perkins love interest. Didn't I try to sell you a podcast recently saying
you did,
one
and
of
you
these
were right.
hosts is a Stephanie Perkins love interest? And I nailed it. I know I was right.
You 100% did. It is correct. Yeah.
What an amazing question. Thank you for that, David.
Thanks, David.
Let me grab another question off the pile. A lot of these aren't questions. It's just, I love you so much, Stephanie Perkins. Anna changed my life. That's what like 50% of these are.
Thank you.
Several people have asked if there will be special editions of the other novels.
Oh yeah, I've been getting that question a lot online. To be really honest, like I highly doubt it. Like Anna, the sales of Anna just so far exceed like all of my other books combined. It's like a different career happening separate from the rest of my career. And if this book did really, really well, I'm sure, like I have a very savvy editor, I'm sure it's something she would consider. But I just see it being very unlikely. I just don't have that kind of career, and Lola and Isla weren't that level of book, unfortunately. I mean, if you guys all start buying it, maybe, but.
So what I want to do here is I want to kind of create a composite question based on a number of the questions. Do you have any plans to revisit the Annaverse, either through sequels or told from the perspective of other characters within the Annaverse?
There are characters who I'm still very interested in their stories, and I know what their stories are. I know what all the stories are for all the characters. I know where they're all headed. And so there's one especially, like there's two I really want to write, but especially one. And I think it probably will happen someday, but it's not the next book and probably not the one after that. And I take a while to write. So who knows?
Stephanie, as we're coming to the end of our time, there's a question I want to ask you. Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions to ask authors. For this question, there are some rules. Rule number one is you must leave all humility and self-deprecation to the side. You must answer this. You must face this question dead on and answer it dead on. What do you, Stephanie Perkins, most love about Stephanie Perkins novels?
Oh, Jeff. You can see me squirming in my seat. Oh, that's a really beautiful question, though. And I love that you asked that of people. And oh, I don't know. I mean, I'll list a few things that I think are hallmarks of my book that I am really proud of. I think I write really strong characters, and who have a lot of depth and complexity. And they are all a form of me. So maybe I'm just liking myself, which is a weird thing to say. But I do enjoy my characters a lot and the way they interact with each other. I love writing dialogue. I think I can write a good kissing scene really well, and I'm proud of that. And I love writing about food. I think I can write food well. Inevitably, I always have to cut out like several scenes of my characters eating because I put too many into my books. And I think I'm really good at setting, and I'm proud of my settings. And I really loved that when Anna, Lola, and Isla were repackaged a few years ago, as well as when Isla came out, excuse me, when the third one came out, they all got new covers, and the covers were reflective of the places where they were set. And that really made me proud because that was what I put so much time and effort and love into. And I really think that setting influences who we are and where we've been and how we interact with the world. And, I've experienced that in my own life. And I just love to write about setting in general. And I think I'm pretty good at it.
I think you got the correct answer. You didn't know it, but there was a correct answer to this question, and I think you answered it. I think that's why we're here tonight. I think it's why you've created these works that endure and are so beloved and have stood the test of time. I mean, that's really difficult to write a book for teenagers that stands the test of time like this. If you think about how many books are published every year, it's what, 200,000, something like that. Go into a big bookstore and see how many books are in there. It's really humbling. And to see a book like Anna survive to this day, it's got to have the special sauce. And that special sauce is character, it's setting, it's kissing scenes, it's all of that, the dialogue, the life, the spirit of the book, it all adds up to something greater than the sum of its parts, right? It is something greater than any one of those things. And it makes the book a living thing. It makes people love the book like a person. And so that's why all of these people have showed up tonight to talk about this wonderful, amazing book that has changed your life. It has changed my life. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Étienne. How do you pronounce his name? Étienne?
Oh boy, you're gonna catch me on this one. So
Uh-oh.
it's Etienne, but
Okay.
I am also I have been called out many times in public for being really lazy and going Etienne. Like I Americanize it all the time. It's terrible. I can't pronounce my own character's name. Etienne. I don't know.
Amazing.
Whatever you want to call him.
Amazing.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
wish
so
I could
much.
hug you. I miss you so much. Please
I
give
miss
your beautiful
you.
wife a hug for me.
I will
I miss
do.
you. Yeah, you guys, like
Congratulations.
my friendship with Jeff is super real. Like we have had Thanksgiving dinner together. Like it's like that level of friendship. He's a huge part of my life, and I'm so grateful that he was here tonight. He lived in Asheville for a long time, which is how we knew each other. And so Malaprops was his hometown bookstore, like it's mine. Thank you again, everyone, for supporting this story that means so much to me, my home away from home, that I've missed so much this year. Getting to go in and sign your books a few days ago. Oh my God, like I'm about to cry. Like it was just, it just, I can't talk anymore. It meant so much to me to be with all of you again, and then to be surrounded by so many friends, seeing your names as I sign those books. Thank you all for supporting me for 10 years. Thanks, Jeff, for being there for even longer.
My pleasure. My pleasure. What an honor it's been to be here.
Did we do it?
Yeah.
I,
I'm coming on to say, yes, you both did it. You both did a fantastic job. And thank you guys again. I got a little teary when Stephanie got teary. Like, thank you for having Malaprops be a part of this. Like, that's incredible. And thank you, Jeff, for hosting. You're a really good host, dude.
I know, right? I was like, oh, we're gonna be good, Katie. Like, no worries. Like, Jeff has got this.
it's pretty easy when it's with somebody I love as much as Steph.
Aw, I know she's great. You are.
She's great.
I love you guys.
I'm about to get everybody to sign off. I just want to remind you can purchase your books through our website, www.malaprops.com. We will sell you anything. We will.
Yes, all the things, not just these, but especially these, but all of them.
Yeah, I mean, especially buy their books because they're amazing people, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. But we will sell you anything, so please buy it from us.
Please do.
Please buy it from us. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming and for being a part of this. And happy anniversary, Anna. I guess that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right.
How do we stop?